After 30 years on the streets, man discovers his true identity thanks to a police officer. Mick Myers had been living and surviving on the streets of California for more than 30 years. His face was weary and haggard from being exposed to the elements, especially the hot sun. He'd been having some issues with the police due to panhandling, but even so, he continued to do what he needed to get something to eat every day. When a sheriff issued Myers yet another citation, they had no idea that this would be the beginning of a life-changing journey. It would not be easy, and it would be painful to face the past and discover his true identity. Myers' life wasn't always so tragic, however. When he was a baby, he was adopted into a loving family in San Leandro, California. He grew up to be easygoing. He had many friends and was even a member of the marching band. Life at home wasn't as good, though. While his adoptive parents were very loving and did all they could to make him feel at home and a part of the family, his siblings, however, were not so welcoming toward him and openly rejected Myers. This made things difficult at home. No matter how hard he tried, his new siblings completely ignored him. Over time, Myers started to withdraw from everyone and started to cut himself off from the world. He became an introvert and felt alone. By Myers' own admission, these feelings continued to follow him into adulthood. Myers lost all contact with his friends. As he described it, Myers was living life as alone as a person could possibly be. When he found out that he was adopted at the age of 16, it explained why his siblings had always been so different. This also caused the relationship with them to fall apart completely. Then something tragic happened. Myers' adoptive parents died unexpectedly. His siblings had never liked him, so after the death of their parents, they started to shut him out completely. Myers decided to cut all ties with them and struck out on his own. This meant he had to survive on his own too. Having no ties to anyone or any place, Myers began to work as a truck driver. For a loner, it was the perfect job. He enjoyed losing himself in his thoughts and the road, but it also meant he became even more isolated. This did take its toll on Myers' mental state as well. Eventually, he lost the job, and since he had no other source of income, it meant he'd lost everything. This is how Myers ended up on the streets. For the next 30 years, Myers lived on the streets of San Leandro, California. To make money, Myers would panhandle or play guitar, all to get a good meal. Unfortunately, the people of San Leandro didn't care for him. This meant that in general, he would be bypassed and ignored. Begging didn't provide him with enough money to survive off. He spent months on the streets, then years. Living on the street became the new normal in Myers' life. Myers quickly lost hope and reassigned himself to the fact that he would die someday on the streets as well. Little did he know that fate would intervene. Deputy Sheriff Jacob Swalwell had more than once dealt with Myers. He warned Myers about begging, but still tried to show Myers the kindness that the rest of the townsfolk denied him. Swalwell was the only person who didn't completely ignore or neglect Myers. Myers, however, ignored the warnings from Swalwell. The deputy sheriff knew that he was running out of options as he watched Myers ignore him and continue to beg for money around town. Swalwell needed to take action and give him a final warning. Swalwell decided to make it official and filed a formal citation and asked for Myers' ID. He was puzzled when Myers told him that he didn't have any ID. I had given him so many warnings and I asked him for his ID and he said he didn't have any ID. And I immediately asked, "Why don't you have an ID?" When the two of them started to talk about Myers' life, the sheriff discovered more about Myers than he ever expected. Myers had no addiction. He wasn't on the street due to vice, criminality, or poor choices. He was a man who had lost everything and had no direction in life.